Well, hello, everybody. So good to see so many of you out here today. We really appreciate it. My name is Denise Fort. I'm President and CEO of the Education Trust, and I am so glad that we have these wonderful leaders with us here today for what promises to be an informative and enlightening discussion. Today, we are going to drill down on the recently released National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP results, which clearly revealed a crisis in unfinished learning as a result of the pandemic, with declines in both math and reading scores for the nation's 4th and 8th graders. Leading a national nonprofit advocacy organization focused on educational equity for students of color and students from low-income backgrounds, I have seen firsthand the challenges our school systems faced before COVID, during COVID, and now post-pandemic. When our schools shut down, it set back all students, but especially Black and Latino students, multilingual learners, and students from low-income backgrounds. The students most impacted disproportionately experience significant disruptions to their learning due to food and housing insecurity, unreliable access to high-speed internet and lack of computers and other devices, reduced access to student supports and education services, limited time to build strong relationships with their teachers, significant reductions to in-person class time, as well as a higher likelihood of losing a parent or caregiver as a result of COVID. To be frank, it's really not surprising we have lost students from the educational system. During the height of the pandemic, a Bellwether Education Partners study estimated that as many as 3 million young people were missing from school completely. And then the NAEP scores were released. Students who already needed support lost the most ground. Scores for students at the 25th percentile declined 11 points in math and 8 points in reading compared to 2020, while scores for students at the 75th percentile declined 5 points in math and 3 points in reading. In math, Black 9-year-olds' scores dropped 13 points, significantly more than the 5% drop by white 9-year-olds, 5-point drop, sorry. Hispanic 9-year-olds recorded an 8-point decline. In reading, average scores for Black, Hispanic, and white students all declined 6 points. And in reading, the scores were not that much better. There were declines for Black students, 5 points, Latino, 4 points, Native American, 7 points, and white students, 3 points. So while the NAEP results were sobering, they were not shocking. We all know it starts by investing in strategies that have been proven to re-engage students and accelerate learning. And we have seen real progress in such things as targeted intensive tutoring, expanded learning time, addressing teacher shortages and teacher diversity, transparent state assessments, and school community wraparound efforts. So it is my hope that today we use this time to talk through what the NAEP results mean for student learning, deepen our understanding of the full impact of unfinished learning, and learn more about how school districts are using their federal ARP funds to boost student achievement. At the end of our discussion, I will open it up to audience questions via the South by Southwest EDU Go app. I am really delighted to be joined by leaders of school districts that EdTrust wrote about in our report, Promising Practices, a School District Guide to Advocating for Equity in American Rescue Plan Spending. As many of you know, the American Rescue Plan provided over $120 billion to states to help with unfinished learning. And at least 5% of that at the state level and 20% for school districts has to be spent on unfinished learning. So with all those dollars out there, there should be an investment in the important things that we know that can help accelerate learning. And our leaders here today are going to help share what's been going on in their school districts. I am so delighted to be joined by leaders of school districts that EdTrust did write about in our report, as I mentioned earlier. Starting with, to my left, Dr. Adrian Battle, Superintendent of Metro Nashville, Tennessee Public Schools. Dr. Stephanie S. Elizalde, Superintendent of Schools for Dallas, Texas, Independent School District. Woo-woo, please give the woo-woo. We need a woo-woo. And Dr. Melanie K. Wyatt, Interim Superintendent for Alexandria City, Virginia Public Schools. Can we give them all a round of applause? So thank you so much for being with us today. And let's go ahead and start the panel discussion. Don't forget that we are taking questions at the end, and so please use Slido in the South by Southwest EDU Go app. My initial question is really just one of reaction. We've seen during the past couple of months lots and lots of data from states and districts detailing the extent of unfinished learning. How are students in your district faring, and what about students from underserved communities, including Black, Latino, and those with limited financial resources? Let's start with Dr. Battle, and then we'll go down the line.
Well, when I think about what's happening in Nashville, the first thing is when we're looking at the trends around what's happening with literacy and numeracy, that's pretty consistent as we're thinking about student growth and achievement. Overall, we're doing better than normal, better than anticipated in rebounding due to some of the disruptions caused by the pandemic. And when I say better than normal, what our recent testing results are indicating to us is that our students are growing at a rate that we did not anticipate. So for our students in Nashville, our growth rating is the highest possible rating that you can receive across our state. In fact, even with achievement, we have seen growth, improvement in 13 out of our 14 tested categories. And so I say better than normal. I use that because we were hearing a lot of information, receiving some research that indicated it will take quite some time to rebound as a result of the pandemic. But in all of our tested categories, we are at, near, or have exceeded pre-pandemic achievement and growth for our students. But what is interesting within our data set is that the gaps still persist. So the gaps we were seeing before the pandemic in our underserved population of students is still there, in particular around our students that are considered economically disadvantaged. It has forced us as a district to go deeper around our equity roadmap, thinking about our equity matrix so we can double down on the strategies we know are proven to help close the gaps around and for our economically disadvantaged students. We also are seeing persistent gaps exist with our EL population of students, but as we dig deeper, we're seeing that as students get a command of the English language, they tend to outperform their peers year over year. So we're seeing some significant movement with regards to growth and with regards to achievement overall, but there is still a lot of work to do given the historical gaps that we've seen even before the pandemic.
Thank you. Dr. Elizalde?
Yeah, I feel like I should just say ditto, ditto, ditto. So in Dallas ISD, we've seen similar patterns, particularly in reading, where I have to say, our teachers have done a phenomenal job of really providing quality instruction and have allowed our students to return to pre-pandemic levels in reading. The challenge with that is that the gap is still there. And math has not seen the same level of rebound that we've seen in reading. And so we certainly know we have an opportunity to focus on what can we do and what are the practices that we do know demonstrate accelerated or disproportionate gain for students, particularly economically disadvantaged children of color or English language learners. And I think the other component is we can get caught up in the numbers themselves, and I think it's really about what the numbers can inform us of the work that we're doing and the work that is to come, rather than simply focusing. There's always a lot of media attention around NAEP scores, and I think this is really, first and foremost, it's what do we do with that data to make it actionable all the way down to the classroom level, and our teachers need our support with the type of materials that they need, and I know that while there's much work to be done, I also want to celebrate the Dallas ISD, the team really has done an excellent job of responding during the period of time that we've had up to this point. And I want to reiterate what Dr. Battle said. It's going to take more than just 1 year for each year that our students have had the interruption of instructional consistency. It's not a one-for-one, and I'll close my remarks on this topic with an analogy. You know, athletes who are in great shape and undergo, let's say, surgery, they rebound and recuperate at a faster rate, and they recuperate even faster if they have facilities that help speed up the healing process. So for kiddos who have had all of those advantages, we've seen them rebound, and likely, and as well, students who have more difficulties are those students who are continuing to need more and more of our attention in an intense way. Thank you.
Thank you. What a way to follow behind that. So when I think about NAEP, I want to first of all remind everyone that with NAEP, it's just to inform our practices and our policies around the work that we do. I could again also say I echo all of these sentiments, but I think it's important for educators, communities, and families to know that while that data is there to inform your practice, it's what we're doing on a daily basis. We're not going to see a recovery at the rate that we saw the loss. So it's important for anyone who's in education and those looking to come into education to make that kind of fact up front. So also in Alexandria City, we've had an Equity for All program and are planned with some initiatives to really already target the gap that was there prior to the pandemic. So that work has been in place for Alexandria City Public Schools for a number of years. Of course, the pandemic did not support us getting to our goal with our 2025 plan, but I think the work that we've done, we've spoken a lot about the math, the writing, and we talk about science and literacy and all of that, but I think for us, what we realized from the data that was presented to us is that it's bigger than the student academic piece, right? That our students are struggling, they face trauma, and in order for us to move out of this kind of position that we're in, we really need to address their social-emotional needs. So we feel like the work that we're doing around social-emotional and academic learning combined, it's what is really giving us the success around the incremental successes. Of course, it's not where we want to be, but I think with that social-emotional piece, it's really pushing our academic learning to a point that we know that we're going to eventually get there and experience that success. For educators out there, I do want to remind everyone that please use your data to inform your practices. Please do not get caught up in the emotion of data, because then it becomes a distraction. And that's exactly what data is not meant to be. It's meant to inform the work. And so we are continuing that focus in Alexandria City as we do see these incremental numbers and growth. And for us, we celebrate growth first, because that's where we're going to really make sure that we retain our highly qualified teachers to want to come back and do this very hard work each and every day.
Thank you. You know, according to a NAEP analysis from Edunomics Lab at Georgetown University, almost 2 million middle and high school students who would have scored in the proficient range if the pandemic hadn't occurred are now below proficient. Their study also found that 700,000 students fell out of advanced level math, which, to quote Edunomics Lab Policy Director Chad Alderman, means 700,000 fewer future scientists, engineers, computer scientists, and medical doctors. So with all that in mind, what are you doing specifically in your districts to address unfinished learning for all students, but especially for students who experience the most hardships during the pandemic?
So I think it's really important that we have a very intentional design around how we are serving students who need the most support. So one of the models that Dallas ISD utilizes is that we recognize we need to have our most effective teachers with our neediest students. And so being able to support those individuals in our classrooms. Currently, we utilize an effectiveness level score for teacher performance based on student performance that will allow us to put our students who need the most help with those individual teachers. We know as well that the profession is struggling to find teachers. And if you read a few headlines, you recognize that it's a difficult time for teachers, to educators, but certainly to teachers who are constantly under attack sometimes, instead of being recognized for the fact that every other profession comes from teachers. And so I think it's really important that the teacher is the program. So what do I mean by that? So we want to ensure that teachers have the highest quality materials and they have the time that is necessary. Time isn't in and of itself the most important variable. It's the time of quality teaching with quality materials. And so teachers can go and find quality materials, but they don't have time for that. So we need to do a better job of supporting the type of curricular materials and supports that they need. We've also paired up interventionists at our campuses so that teachers can focus both ends of the spectrum. You mentioned earlier, Denise, about students that were even in the top half, that were in advanced, that have fallen behind. This needs to be a both and, not an either or. We need to serve our neediest students, and we also need to ensure that students who are performing at advanced and advanced high levels, that those students continue to be challenged so that they can regain the abilities that they already had. And so I think collectively putting in interventionists and allowing teachers to really be the focus of our programming is important. And I think the last piece is, one of the things I've recognized, at least, certainly in response to maybe if we're finally coming out of this pandemic, is that we've also overwhelmed our schools with a lot of other stuff. And we're going to need to help simplify and focus on the essential, and everything else needs to get out of the way. If we say that students need to be the focal point, then we need to make sure that we've created a system that puts students in the center and teachers having the ability to do their job.
Amen. Dr. K. Wyatt?
Yes, I want to kind of speak to, and I think it's important to understand the communities that we serve. I come from a very diverse community right outside of Washington, D.C., where we have almost 60% free and reduced lunch meals, and we have a very diverse population of over 110 countries and 120 plus languages that we serve. So for us, trying to recover from a pandemic looks very different from a division that does not have to face those challenges. So in our unique communities, we found that our challenges are really making sure that not only do we reach the academic piece, and I mentioned earlier about the socio-emotional piece, but it's reaching out to our parents to make sure that they feel supported because of the trauma that has happened with the pandemic. So with that being said, we are really focused on connecting our parents to the learning process along with us. We have translation lines. We have a FACE, which is a family and community engagement center, so they can come and really experience what changes look like in our curriculum and how they can support their students, right? So we've kind of heard about what it looks like from the teacher side, and I think we're all kind of doing those similar routines and patterns and practices, but until sometimes we also bring in that parent and community piece, I think we're going to continue to see some struggles because we want our parents to feel comfortable in knowing how we're moving forward with our academic program. So we also have an MTSS program. I'm sure everyone has heard about that and how we tier our work. Our tier 1, of course, is our about 80%, where we're really trying to incorporate some of those proven strategies from research-based programs that really work. And just a reminder, when you're doing your programs at that level, make sure you do program evaluation and sunset programs that are not working and giving you that growth that you're hoping to see during this time. And of course, with your tier 2 and tier 3 students, make sure you have programming that goes in and meets those students where they are. And that's very hard to often do during the day, so we're very fortunate that we have a whole department. We're very fortunate in Alexandria to do that, especially with the funding. We have a whole department that's focused on community engagement that can really reach out to our parents, can really reach out to anyone that we need around partners to build out-of-school time programs. And with those out-of-school time programs is where we're really seeing that we can take what areas, maybe a different school, each school has a different challenge, take that school's challenge, bring in an out-of-school program of tutoring after school, Saturday mornings, getting parents connected, and really building and meeting some of those additional skills that we may not be able to meet during the day because of the group size. But those one-on-one after schools with maybe a partnership or a nonprofit or organization is really giving us our gains and our growth for our students, because we do have some of those language challenges, and small group instruction we know is really best for those students. So we are continuing with those programs and those efforts, and really celebrating with our families that when their child is growing in a program, and it's important to know that we don't always see those after school time programs as something else, or it's an enrichment or remediation, but it's really just an extension of their learning. So I would like to
Thank
leave
you,
it on that note.
Dr. Wyatt. Dr. Battle.
Well, I can agree more with my colleagues here around how we're approaching unfinished learning. It's pretty basic. We've got to make sure that the conditions are set for quality teaching and learning to take place. It is about valuing our professional educators and all those who support the learning of our students. It is about quality leadership in all of our learning communities and protecting planning time, the instructional materials. Teachers don't have time to go on a search or journey for that. And so doing a better job around collectively and in a collaborative space, determining those high quality materials are essential to our ability to close those gaps and accelerate learning. We've chosen to take somewhat of a three-pronged approach in Nashville. The first one being solely around the academic piece and the achievement piece. We've doubled down, particularly around literacy and numeracy in our content areas. Again, providing high quality professional learning along with the materials and resources that are needed. That's something that we take for granted sometimes. We have to make sure that there is genuine access for all of our students, regardless of the schools that they are learning in. We're also focused on the growth of our students. And so we are a district that's been able to stand up a high dosage, high impact, gold standard tutoring program. We refer to it as Accelerating Scholars. We're seeing already just the confidence being built in our students, and we're starting to see our students grow throughout those one-to-one and small group sessions that they're a part of. And then, just like my colleagues, it is important that we're not addressing academics in isolation. It is about the academics and the social emotional learning integration that must take place. And so we've chosen to launch what we call our Navigators program in Nashville, where we're connecting all of our students to a caring adult. It may not be their teacher. It might be the front office leader. It may be the counselor. It may be another grade level teacher or counselor as well. But we're setting that as a priority because we know relationships matter. Connectedness to your learning environment matters. And our mantra in Nashville is every student known. And if we're serious about knowing our students, making sure that we value them, that they feel seen, that they feel heard, it's important to have structures in place that speaks to that. And so that's the approach we're choosing to take in that academic and social emotional learning integration space.
Thank you. I want to turn it over to talk about implementation, and I know that you all are still very early in your implementation in some matters, but what are some of the early results you are seeing in the district, and what has surprised you about what you are seeing, as well as what are you most hopeful about? Dr. K. Wyatt.
Well, those three questions there, let me make sure I address them all. I may need you to repeat those. I feel like that was an interview question there. So what we're hoping to gain from it is really just our children experiencing growth and success. And for us, we were one of the school divisions that was out a little bit longer than some of our neighboring districts. So we were really focused on getting our students back in to, I hate to use, we always say the word normal schooling because there's no longer normal schooling. So that's kind of one of the pieces that we definitely wanted to address there. And if you could repeat those last two questions for me.
What has surprised you, and what are you most hopeful about?
Oh, surprised me. What has surprised me? Of course, I'm sitting in an interim role, so I came in a different role in this division as a chief executive director and chief of HR. And I can tell you what has surprised me the most is the outpouring of support. We always talk about grace and giving our teachers grace, and I think our community especially has really gone above and beyond with their outpouring of partnerships to give us all of our out of school time resources. Some of those are thematic around wellness for our parents, some is around wellness for our students. So I think what has surprised me is just the outpouring of support for educators and teachers in K-12 as we know it. And so what I think we really want to see come from this is building a brand of teachers that we can all be proud of. Right? We can sit here and talk about NAEP. If that's going to inform what our decisions are about, I think it's important that we as educators keep putting out there how we can really grow and support our students and build pipelines, because I am concerned about teacher retention and the pipeline. So if they were to say what keeps you up at night, it's the teacher pipeline, because we do know that putting quality teachers in front of our students is the leading single most successful indicator of student achievement. So I think that's what we need to focus on. I think we said it earlier, you know, talking about relationships, it's people over programs, and I think that's important. And what we really also need to focus on is not building on what's broken. I think too often in our system of education, there's things that have been there. We need to sunset some of those and build on a new foundation that's going to really get our students to where they can experience success.
Dr. Battle, what about you? What are the early results you're seeing in your district? What's surprising you, and what are you most hopeful about?
Yeah, I think I would be remiss if I didn't start with just the resiliency of our community, our teachers, and the quality of their teaching and their instructional delivery. Again, our students showing up and are pushing forward with being engaged, the level of parent engagement and community involvement and focus around making sure that we're accelerating outcomes for our students. I mean, generally speaking, we're seeing some significant results. I started out talking about growth and achievement. We're reducing the number of priority schools within our district. We've increased the number of reward schools or top performing schools in our district. But if I wanted to be quite frank about this, one of the things that we struggle with even before the pandemic and before the NAEP results, and I hope some of you can relate to this and the urgency to disrupt this kind of system, is going out into your district and across your community, and depending on where you are, right, kind of dictates the level or the quality of instructional supports and other supports, wraparound services that are available for students. And so we've leveraged some of our ESSER funds and our focus coming out of the pandemic around leveling that playing field and making sure that all of our students have that genuine access and relationships that are much needed to move the needle for our students. I am most hopeful for, as we're digging deep into our data, to begin to see those achievement gaps close, because we know that it's going to be the difference maker for all of our students as they graduate and they move on to their post-secondary opportunities, whether that be college, career, or whatever they choose next for their lives.
Thank you. Dr. Elizalde?
So I think what I'll do is talk about our latest MAP data. Many of you may be familiar with measures of academic performance that NWEA puts out. We utilize that, and I think it's important to, again, restate what my colleague, both of them have mentioned before. NAEP is a moment in time. It's what do we do with it? And MAP allows us to continue to take some benchmarking of are our students following into the growth models that were expected. And so with that, we are seeing some real positive results. Tomorrow night, or tomorrow during the day, as a matter of fact, we'll be presenting to our Board of Trustees our progress measure of second grade performance in reading and in math, and specifically African American students. That's our lowest performing group, and we must serve those who need the most. Those must be first. Those students that are last need to be first. And so with that, and we also know that a high tide raises all boats. And so when we implement those strategies for students who need that, all students improve. It's not an either or. So our results are showing just within this first semester that our African American second graders have improved at 25% faster rate than our all student group. And so that is indicative that the strategies that we're utilizing are beginning to demonstrate that accelerated growth or disproportionate gain that we need. And at the same time, all students grew too, which is the whole point, right? Everybody needs to grow, and students who are not performing at the on-grade level need to perform. We need to improve that growth faster. And that's happening in several areas. Not everywhere, but that information then can help us transfer that learning to some other grade levels as we're utilizing the data. With regard to surprises and hope, I want to say I'm surprised, and then I also want to say I'm really not surprised. The outpouring of support, again, from our community, nonprofits, businesses, individual parents, community members, church groups have rallied around our school district, understanding very well that really public schools are about economic mobility, and it is about the stability of our entire community. Certainly the City of Dallas, the Chamber of Commerce, so many individuals and groups that work with us. So it is, and yet not surprising, their dedication. And my hope is that we are able to leverage that so that our students do get additional quality instructional time that is also relevant, interesting, and culturally relevant. And all of our groups are coming together with that in mind, so that our social emotional support of students starts at the beginning of the day and is a part of the entire day. And so that at the end of the day, students feel just as welcome as they did at the beginning of the day.
Thank you. Dr. K. Wyatt, did you want to get back in?
Yes, I'm sorry. I get very excited about this topic and wanted to share that what we're hearing up here is an equity, right? But when we talk about what our students need and when we get down to the instructional practices, equity doesn't mean it's equal. And so too often, I feel like we hear that outside of the K-12 environment. And I think we need to make sure that when we're doing this work, that we are truly individualizing those needs. We talk, most of us are looking at this from, a remediation standpoint, an intervention, when and wherever it is. Make sure that you're meeting those students' needs when you're talking about equity. Our Black students need that. Our Latina, Hispanic students need that. Our students from low-income families need that. They need us to come to where they are, and that's the only way we're going to get there. And just a quick example of one of our successes is that we also embed 30 minutes every day, K through 12, for social emotional learning and tie it into our academic learning. And that's where we're seeing some of our growth, because we are really getting to the emotional needs of our students. And our staff, have owned that. They're committed to that around the professional learning. And we know we still need to grow in that areas, because all of our activities are not meeting all students. But to hear the success stories around just putting that in your day and committing to that, and we have school board support of that, is a huge step in the right direction for our children. And also making sure that you support the well-being of your staff. That is important to move any needle, whether it's the academics around math or writing, but we need our educators. We need them to be well, just like we need our students to be well. I'm a whole child person. I want to make sure that our educators, our parents, and our students, they're challenged, they're healthy, they're engaged, and they feel safe and supported. And that's how we're going to move that needle.
Thank you. That's such an important point. I mean, if we can't focus on our kids' well-being, how are we going to know that they're going to show up to school ready and able to learn? Thank you so much for that. What more would you like to accomplish? Like, obviously, in some ways, this is just the finger in the dike, but there's so much more that we need to accomplish. And what is needed for you to accomplish this? Let's start with Dr. Battle.
Yeah, when I think about this question, I've talked a lot about the gaps that still persist, right? I think pandemic aside, we had some real challenges, but yet opportunities to move the needle forward for our students. I think about NAEP scores. I think about third grade literacy, which tends to drive the conversation around where we are academically in our public education institutions. So what I'm looking forward to is building a pathway where we're thinking about students from birth, our young people at birth, and what it's going to take to disrupt what we're seeing in that third grade reading and literacy, those scores being stagnant right now. We're not going to be able to disrupt that pipeline if we don't start much earlier, and having the support of our school boards and our state legislators and what's coming from the federal government to help us really bridge that gap. When we're talking about equity, we have to make sure that, again, regardless of the background of that student, that we're preparing them for a successful career in our school system. So thinking about first, from birth, building strong pathways throughout our systems in the pre-K-12 space. But y'all, we've got to change the conversation. It's not just about a high school diploma. It's not just about graduation rates. It's about what our students have access to, what doors they're able to walk through once they graduate from our schools. So it is about the accountability of access and the toolbox we're building for our students, and having access to quality post-secondary opportunities, and not just jobs, but careers in a field that are high demand and high wage for them to live successfully and thrive in the communities that they exist in.
Thank you so much. Dr. Elizalde?
Well, I'm going to build on Dr. Battle's comments to remind everyone, including myself, because I nearly forgot here for a minute. Dallas ISD has early college high school programs at every single one of our comprehensive high schools. That's 22 comprehensive high schools, and these are students that can graduate from high school and get an associate's degree. In some instances, they get their associate's degree before we've given them their high school diploma. And so these are students, usually first generation college graduates, going to college, not even about being college graduates. We've also now expanded into creating 4 career institutes. Those are aligned also with business and industry. They come in and do compression planning with us to help us align our curriculum to what the job market is actually looking for in careers. Too often, and I'll use myself as an example, as a trained biologist, when was the last time I actually did research? Like, that was a long time ago. So what do I know about current research? So these companies come in and work with our teams and help us to design the curriculum aligned to jobs that are going unfilled in the Dallas Metroplex area, so that our students can indeed leave high school right into careers. And in many of these instances, whether it is the career field or college pathway, the skills are still needed are still the same. Critical thinking, relationships, being able to problem solve. So when we know that those are the skills they need and align the curriculum, what we're seeing is our students are being far more successful in going beyond just a high school diploma. So we've actually started now 6- and 8-year plans. We used to think about students in 8th grade and creating 4-year plans. We really need to create 6- and 8-year plans for our students, because it is our job to make sure that not only that they leave us, but that they continue their trajectory of what the whole foundation of their pre-K-12 education was. I also think it's really vital that as we continue to work with our students, that we celebrate all of the successes that we are having. Because part of the challenge that we're having is that we're not always telling the story of where our students are in fact rebounding and outperforming what maybe people would have expected. And at some point we know, and I'm glad that Dr. Battle mentioned, pre-COVID, while we certainly have seen the interruption or the disruption in learning because of COVID, many of our schools were on a very fast trajectory of improvement prior to the pandemic, and we've now seen this, what we used to call, I guess, a summer slide, and now is like the effects of the pandemic. But the truth is, we haven't been able to close those gaps, and we're gonna have to continue to take that head on and recognize that there are some things that will close those gaps, and some of them require a lot of funding. And it is our job right now to make good use of those ESSER dollars or ARP, American Rescue Plan, so that we can, in fact, make differences. And I'll close with the third grade reading as also our North Star, and third grade math in all students and in our student groups. Our Board of Trustees evaluates me on student academic performance. That's the overwhelming percentage of my evaluation. So third grade reading scores and third grade math scores are a component of that evaluation, which also means that all of the folks that work with me, guess what's their evaluation plan? You guessed it, it's third grade reading and third grade math too. So it's important that we really see, are we focusing and giving them the tools that they need at the campus level prior to that third grade? We all know what happens once students are on grade level at third grade. Success is absolutely imminent. We've got to front load, and some of that is truly on, I think, us as school district leaders and principals at the campus level. There is no shortcut. There's no shortcut. And too often we get test-driven instead of focusing on the authentic teaching and learning, and we're taking some of the love out of what teachers wanted to do and what kids want, what we want them to experience. So right now, I think is a good opportunity for us to pivot back to why we chose to become educators, and let's not take the joy out of true teaching and learning, and let's focus and support that process going all the way back to Madeline Hunter, so that we can really see a lesson cycle and let our teachers have our students grow.
Thank you. Dr. K. Wyatt?
I'm going to take this in a little bit of a different direction. I think about all the funding that was given to us to close this gap in a matter of years. But for my 27 years in education, I want to know, where was the funding? And can this continue? Because if we are pouring this amount in, my concern and what I'd like to see is that we go out and advocate to continue to properly and fully fund our schools. Because once these resources are gone, that's another thing that keeps me up at night. How are we going to continue to sustain all the work that you've heard here today, as well as any other challenges that may come our way as educators? Because you've heard us all say it, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. And that funding came about really quickly for us to make this shift. I would hope that all of us are out there contacting our legislators to make sure that they continue to fund K-12 education the way it should be. And that is something that if you're a member of an organization, please make sure they have papers on it, that they are out there advocating with you, taking teams from your schools to advocate for what's right. I come from Virginia. I won't go into the politics of that, but I think that's important to make sure that you too are a face in advocating for your schools. You asked what I hope to see in the future from all of this. And I'm going to be very frank, 27 years of this. I'm a career switcher coming into education. I did it for the passion. We all know we're not doing it for the money. But what I want to see is that we do not have another session like this, talking about gaps for Black students, Hispanic or Latino students, low-income family students. And I think that's where, I know it's going to take time for us to get there with our NAEP, our writing, all of our instruction, our materials, our interventions. But we've been talking about this topic way too long, and it needs to end. And the only way we're going to get there is with you. It's with your support, continuing to build a quality brand of teachers, creating pipelines, and using the NAEP data in all of your math and all of your early screeners to make sure we're meeting social, emotional, and academic learning needs of our students. And what I would say, and what I say to my team all the time, it's, one team, one journey, and that's the way it should be for K-12. We're all in this together. Don't stop, don't quit, because all too often while we're sitting here having these conversations, we are losing teachers by the day. And without our teachers, we cannot do this work. And I think, I forget which one of my colleagues said it, about having their teachers and making sure we value them. Until we get there, I'm really concerned about where we're going with K-12. But I know by looking at your faces, in this room today, I know we're going to get to a point where we're not going to be having a discussion about gaps in education of Blacks, Latinos, and economically disadvantaged families and students. So I'd like to close on that, please.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to let you close yet, but that was a pearl of wisdom that I'm going to take home from today. Folks, we have these amazing leaders here, but we also have folks out in the audience who are doing some of the same work, and folks who will be watching this on YouTube that'll want to learn from you. So do you have other pearls of wisdom, any other pearls of wisdom for them as they address unfinished learning?
So I think I'll start with, we don't have achievement gaps. We have experiential and opportunity gaps. That's what we see in data, but what is producing that comes from the fact that we don't have the same level of opportunities and experiences for all of our students. And that is where some of the additional funds that we're using, we certainly use them in Dallas ISD, it actually means we have to increase field trips. So I would say that, I think it's important that instead of, I've seen this too often, when we think our scores aren't where we need to be, we actually remove the contextual relevant type of education, and we try to minimize the instruction into paper and pencil. And now we know the only way you get better at reading, it's the latest in research, is by reading. So we have to have our kids, though, have opportunity. That science of reading, I really think needs to be, it's the science of teaching. Because what's good for the science of reading is actually applicable, knowing that students need to understand things from a concrete to abstract. That's where that engagement comes from, and that's from that relevancy. But I would absolutely want us to be reminded, I want to remind myself, the outcomes we're seeing in achievement is about us needing to provide additional experiences and opportunities with the high quality instruction, with the extended out of school time that is meaningful for kids. It is about music, it is about art, it is about theater. Those are the things our kids need in addition to their academics.
Thank you. Dr. K. Wyatt?
I feel like I already gave my wisdom. Maybe there's no more left, but I want to say this, pace yourselves. Pace yourselves because burnout is real. What you're hearing today in the 30 or 40 minutes that we're here are hours and hours upon work and research, science of reading, and any other resource or program you can imagine. Just pace yourself, continue to put people over programs and politics, and really just go in every day with a new experience. Make sure you give your students and your staff new experiences and new opportunities each day, and pace yourself. And also remember, please don't build on broken foundations. If the program's not working, sometimes you just have to let it go. And that's very hard for a lot of school divisions if it's not working to kind of build on that. So if it's a broken foundation, just please let it go and remember that trauma takes time to heal.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dr. Battle?
Well, one of the first things I think of is, and this is more for our external push, we've got to stop saying our students are resilient, but, right? Our students are resilient. With the right supports, with the right professional educators beside them on this journey, we will get to our ultimate goals. I think this work is also about, and it just reminds me of our continuous improvement cycle in our district, knowing where you are, but committing not to stay there. What's most important to me, not only as a superintendent, but as a professional educator and as a parent, is that we're stronger today than we were yesterday. And we're going to take the learnings of today into tomorrow so we continue to build systems that work for all of our students. And one thing that has really resonated with me over the last few years is not being paralyzed with perfection, thinking about what we can do now to impact the trajectory for our students in the future. So we have these ideal visions and perfect pictures of what we want as our outcome, but not letting that get in the way of building towards what it is we want for our students as we talk about opportunity gaps. How do we address that today and build towards even more opportunities for our students tomorrow? And the last thing that is top of mind for me is, and my team reminds me all the time, I stopped talking about the pandemic and the distractions months ago. We've got to move beyond that. We've got to move beyond it, and we've got to come together, and we've got to do what we do best, and that is support and educate our young people. And so if anything else, I want to make sure all of you are encouraged. You're doing the right work. Keep pushing, but take care of yourself and take care of others.
Thank you so much for that. I have many more questions I could ask, but there are some really great questions that you all have asked. So I'm going to go ahead and ask them from, hopefully I'm not butchering your name, Dana. Dana Thomas. The issues mentioned are multiplied and amplified by not having certified teachers. What are your districts doing to support teacher mental health and reduce burnout? Why don't we start with Dr. Kay Wyatt?
Well, we are really in the middle of a redesign of our wellness program for staff. Fortunately, of course, like many of your divisions, you can work with your healthcare benefits programs, and they can provide you funding to offer a number of, you can do counseling sessions, you can do well-being sessions. We have wellness champions in each of our schools because we do have very different school communities, so it's not a one-size-fits-all. So they go in and they actually survey their schools to see what their needs are around wellness, and then they come back with programs and a plan for each year that has to come through our human resources department to make sure that we can fund their plan, give them activities. It could be classes. It's a number of things that we give them. And of course, we also work with our EAP program because we want to make sure that our students and our teachers alike have a place to go. So we have a helpline for our students. And because of this, for teacher wellness, we have one through our EAP for our staff as well. And to reduce burnout, that one is a little bit more challenging, but we're looking at options that we can remove from the day. We're working with we have an educational association in Alexandria, and we meet with them. We have a teacher advisory council we meet with, and all of those groups come back and we meet with our senior leadership team to really provide us with recommendations on how we can change things in teachers' daily lives.
Thank you. Dr. Battle?
In a similar fashion, we've been focused on beefing up our wellness program for all of our staff members in a time where prices are increasing and the inflation that's there. We're taking that on as a district because we know the care and support that is needed and should be available to all of our staff. So we're innovating in every way you can think of, from in-person to virtual to small groups to individual, just making sure we're as responsive as possible. We're looking at some of our trend data and giving our teachers an opportunity to tell us what we need more of or what we need to tweak in our wellness program. But two fundamental things that we've tried to implement in Nashville, one of them is, and this is just in support, we no longer refer to ourselves as a district office. In our district, we are a support hub. And so everything that we do is in direct lock and step correlation with what our teachers are telling us they need and what our leaders are advocating for. And so just fundamentally, we're shifting our mindsets around our role as district leaders and when we need to step in and support in various ways. Another way that we're trying to address this, I think you mentioned this as well, my colleague has, we've developed directors cabinets where we're just taking time to talk. Just everything else aside, let's talk about what's happening. And one thing that's come out of that is we've launched a pilot of redesigning the teaching profession. So we've got a number of our teachers across many of our schools in this work around what does it look like around co-teaching and what does it look like around the professional learning time that's needed within the school day. We all need to sharpen our saw and to refine our practices. What does it look like to have peers coming in and sharing feedback and supporting one another and modeling lessons? And so when we think about it from the wellness standpoint to the support standpoint, we're trying to be on the ground as much as possible and responding to exactly what our educators and our support staff are telling us.
Thank you. Dr. Elizalde?
I think it's similar to my colleagues, and I do want to reiterate, we have had the largest number of use of our EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, regarding wanting support for mental health and counseling services, which is obviously an indicator of something we need to do more of. Campuses have created Zen rooms at schools, places where our team members can go and just kind of, chill, and aromatherapy. These are things that have come from teachers. It may seem like something small, but that's the other thing I've discovered about our teachers is their asks are usually very small. But it's the little things that they ask us for that if we can, we should, because it can make a big difference so that we can keep from getting to the burnout.
Thank you. I'm hoping to get at least one more question in from Jennifer. The focus of data numbers often trumps students' actual learning. What do you believe is the best way to keep the focus on learning and not just passing a test? Why don't we start with Dr. Elizalde?
Great, because this is like my platform right
All right.
here.
Yay.
I think, it's not about preparing kids for a test. It's about preparing them, and I'll even go a step beyond finishing that sentence. We have to stop preparing kids for our present and prepare them for their future. And so it's really important. Now, tests are a part of what we have to deal with, so I can't ignore that it's there, but I can support our team in saying, I know that when we have, and we let our teachers do authentic teaching and learning, when we let our principals support our teachers in that way, what we will get will be students that can do critical thinking, and they will do fine on the assessment. The reverse is not true. Preparing kids for a standardized test will not directly align with whether kids will be able to go not just to a job, but to a career, college career readiness. And so I think what really, and I do think that the big responsibility there is with leaders. It's our philosophy. If we're going to be test driven, that will go all the way down to the classroom level. And so it is permeating if we don't actually if we're not completely overt about the fact that we should not be test driven, that we should again use data to inform practices, but that should not be the outcome. It should be about what our kids know and are able to do, and how they can represent that in a multiple different ways, using even a variety of media. The more we actually do that, the better our students will do on any assessment. So I think we're minimizing the curriculum when we try to teach to a particular test. Regardless of what our states are expecting, I think it's our job to challenge ourselves to not fall into that trap.
Thank you. Let me give 45 seconds each to, starting with Dr. K. Wyatt.
I would echo all of that since I only have 45 minutes and I like to talk, but it's a culture. It is a culture that is created by leadership. And if you have a culture that's accepting of this type of understanding, that if you have quality teaching and you engage your students and they want it to be fun and your teachers are enjoying the work, the test scores will come.
Thank you. Dr. Battle.
I could not agree more with my colleagues here. I mentioned earlier that our mantra is every student known. You don't hear a data point in that. What's most important is that we know our students. We know their aspirations. We know their talents. We know their interests. If we keep the joy of learning and teaching where we know it needs to be and not focused on the test, which is a part of what we do, ultimately, we can achieve this. We can continue to focus on the learning process and not the test itself. But when you're pouring into students in this way, every student is going to thrive, and they'll exceed the expectation no matter what comes their way.
Thank you so much. And I just want to thank this amazing panel. Please join me giving them a wonderful and loud round of applause. This has been such a delightful group of ladies, and I'm so glad that students in our country have you by their side, supporting them where they need it. And again, appreciation to everyone here today. Have a great day.